I'm paying a lot of fees in order to tap into a soft brand by Hilton or Marriott. And I have to believe, after detailed sort of quantitative analysis, that I'm going to at least break even, and hopefully more than break even after the fees, like more occupancy, more rate, and ultimately more NOI, even after paying the 8, 9, 10, 12% when you add all the fees in to chain affiliate. And a big part of that appeal is people absolutely want their points. And that's a real driver.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. In just a moment, you'll meet John Rutledge, founder of Oxford Capital Group and creator of the Godfrey Hotels, an innovative collection of boutique properties that blend upscale luxury with a social, lifestyle-driven experience. With a unique vantage point in both the world of branded chain hotels and also independent boutique properties, John's insights are invaluable for understanding today's rapidly changing hospitality landscape. In this episode, John and I discuss the rise of the modern luxury traveler, how today's travelers are moving beyond materialism to prioritize meaningful experience, deeper connections, and a balanced lifestyle. We talk about the rise of boutique hotels, why smaller, independent properties are thriving alongside global hotel chains, and how John manages both worlds, creating powerful in-house hotel brands while also working with the big-name affiliations like Hilton and Marriott. We talk about the Godfrey journey, how John and his team acquired a distressed property and then created a luxury lifestyle brand that resonates with today's social experience-driven traveler. We talk about balancing chains and independence, how John navigates the complexities of managing both branded hotels and independent brands that he owns and operates, offering a rare perspective on the strengths and challenges of each. And then we close our conversation with the discussion on the future of luxury. John shares his predictions for the next decade, including the continued growth of experiential travel, lifestyle hotels, and the rise of leisure travel. John's dual experience of owning and operating both chain-affiliated and independent properties makes this episode a must-listen for anyone interested in the future of hospitality, boutique hotel branding, and entrepreneurial success. His rare perspective provides a roadmap for navigating the evolving demands of today's luxury travelers and shaping the next wave of hotel innovation. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet John. Alrighty, John, we are live. Good sir. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing great.
Well, it's a true honor to get to talk to you because, as I was just mentioning before we hit live here, I am a huge fan of one of your guys' brands, the Godfrey Hotels. I have stayed in the Boston Godfrey multiple times, and it's literally like the one hotel that I refer most people to. Just period. Anytime someone's in the city. And I haven't had a chance to stay at the hotel in the Godfrey in Chicago, but it's on my list as well. And I know you guys have several others in other locations too. So it's just a treat to get to talk to you. You've had quite an impressive career in real estate and hospitality and entrepreneurship. I want to ask you this kind of big open-ended question at the start of this conversation, because it's one of my favorite things to do for folks who had storied careers, is what's something that you believe today that you didn't believe maybe 5 or 10 years ago about business, about life? Very, very open-ended here, but what's a belief that you have today that you didn't a decade or so ago?
That's a tricky one. I mean, look, there are a lot of things. I guess one of my observations is that this recent generation of young emerging adults and professionals I think to their credit, really are focused on sort of quality of life and sort of a balanced life approach to life. Maybe, incrementally or maybe even more than incrementally more so than many of the generations that preceded them. Right now, for what it's worth, I've always focused on that myself. Right, I've really aspired to be sort of a multi-dimensionally, hopefully successful person. Right, had hopefully a successful career, but close family life, close friends, deeply involved with my civic engagement in various museums and hospitals, and living a rich, full life, travel and culture and friendships and family. That's always been an aspiration of mine. I've tried my best to live that life, but I would say that I definitely have observed that there is a materially larger percentage of young professionals that aspire to that and that are very experientially driven than many of their, again, preceding generations. So that's sort of a macro observation. And I think there's a lot of positive to that, as long as they retain the sort of entrepreneurial energy and work ethic that allows them to sort of achieve their full potential.
Do you think that this has much, if anything, to do with just the rise of the internet, the rise of the internet workforce, right? The ability to kind of work remotely? I'm curious, what are sort of the underlying trends that you think might be why this generation acts the way that it does?
Yeah, no, I think that certainly post-COVID in particular, that whole remote, flexibility and optionality of where you can work, particularly in the sort of professional intellectual class, that certainly accelerated this trend. But I think the trend predated that. I think the trend was really people sort of looking around and just being aware of the environment, aware of observing sort of at times overly materialistic approaches to life. And I think sort of seeking a slightly higher consciousness around, hey, how do we, weave in experiences and relationships and friendships and social engagement and prioritize that at even at a higher level than sort of material things. Yeah. And I think that's just sort of been an evolution that's happened, and then again accelerated dramatically by COVID and the flexibility that one has.
Yeah, and of all sectors that have felt this, I mean, travel, right, and hospitality has certainly felt this and been affected by it. I think mostly in a positive way. This sort of increase in desire to travel, increased desire to travel to more remote locations, maybe second tier, third tier cities, even maybe totally off grid, right? We're seeing sort of this huge emergence of folks wanting to go to the places that folks don't know about yet, right? Go off the beaten path.
I think there for sure that is happening and has happened. And I think, if anything, COVID forced people to look in the mirror and then say, wow, I really feel locked down. And if anything, they felt trapped and they wanted to sort of rebound and go the other way and say, wow, more than ever, I want to get out in the world and experience it. And I missed not being able to do that during that sort of lockdown phase. And it made me appreciate it even more. And I think, frankly, just the reality is economically at a very global level, there are more and more people entering the middle class around the world, more and more people having some flexibility resource-wise to allow them to travel the world and see unique places. And this, between the internet and social connectivity, the world has shrunk, right? So I think people see things happening around the world and say, I'm going to go there. And there are more people with the resources to allow them to travel. And so I think it's all that virtuous cycle that has accelerated that.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive into a little bit about the work that you do and really what has inspired the work. I mean, you could have done, sounds like you're a smart guy. You could have done a lot of different things. Like, what led you to hospitality specifically? What aspect of it was attractive to you, and why did you decide to dedicate your career to it?
Very good question. Look, it wasn't like I went to hotel school or something like that. For me, the honest answer is it started as sort of a contrarian investment thesis, right? I was in graduate school and I was looking out. I'd studied real estate and finance and economics undergrad, and in grad school, finance and economics. I'd worked in the global real estate investment business in Chicago between college and grad school. And so I understood real estate investment and finance and economics. And in the early 90s, all the real estate related asset classes were overbuilt due to tax law changes, or tax law generating basically write-offs, three for one write-offs back in the day in the late 80s prompted into dramatic overbuilding across the sectors. So I began looking at opportunities to sort of buy real estate attractively. And hotels are sort of always half real estate, half operating business. They're sort of a hybrid sector, right?
Yeah.
And so I went to school on the sector and it was very distressed. And I said, wow, maybe I could begin to buy hotels and turn them around at deep discounts to what it would cost to replace them. And I understood real estate investment. And I also was intrigued by the multidimensional nature of hotels. It was a more complicated ecosystem. So that was just more intellectually appealing to me and more generally appealing to me, that it was an operating business, but with real estate characteristics. I also could relate to hotels. Many of us have had the good fortune to travel and experience different places, and hotels are like a home away from home. So it was a much more emotional connection than a typical sort of conventional real estate building, if you will. And so that was sort of an icing on the cake.
Yeah.
But it was really from a real estate investment contrarian perspective initially. And then went to school on the sector, raised capital, and began acquiring and repositioning hotels, initially regionally in the Chicago area, then nationally and some internationally. So now we acquire, develop, own, and manage, hospitality real estate around the country and to some degree internationally. And we have some of our own brands, et cetera. But that was the genesis.
Yeah. That's amazing. Take us back, if you don't mind, to what those early days were like, because today I think there's this renaissance, at least from my perspective, happening in the space where boutique is booming, right? This idea of supporting and wanting to venture off not just into distant lands, but to distant brands, right, or lesser well-known brands, right? You see the consumer sort of actively making decisions with their purchasing power to go support the mom and pop operator, or at least the independent operator, and we're seeing sort of these really cool dynamic shifts happening in the marketplace. We're also seeing new hospitality asset classes kind of emerge, like these landscape resorts, these short-term rentals obviously had this big boom during COVID. We're seeing sort of the lines between some of these operators in the short-term rental space and the boutique hotel space sort of like blur a little bit, right? So it feels like there's a lot of energy in the space right now. When you first started back in the late 80s, did it kind of also seem like there was a bunch of new energy, given sort of the observations that you had made about the marketplace? Were other folks making those same observations? What was the buzz look like then? Yeah.
Well, the buzz, frankly, again, it was really the early 90s that I started in this sector, mid to late 80s in sort of real estate investment and finance generally. But I would say, look, there's always been innovation. It's funny, you talk about the innovation of the boutique hotel. As I describe, all hotels were boutique hotels, one-off hotels back in the day, right? There was the Plaza and the Drake in Chicago, the Plaza in New York, and the Book Cadillac in Detroit, and the George Cinq in Paris, and the Connaught in London. These were one-off iconic assets.
Yeah.
And it was really the American chains, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the Hyatts, that created more chain affiliations and the sort of, in quotes, brands. But many of the original ones were brands of one, the Plaza, right?
Yeah.
And so that evolved. And then I think, if anything, the internet democratized access to the global distribution system and allowed some of the independents over time to begin competing with the big chains again. Yeah. So when the chains took over and dominated in Hilton and Hyatt and Marriott and all the others, they sort of were eclipsing the independents. But then again, the internet democratized access, and the independents could fight back and access some of the global distribution systems and demand. And so over time, there was more of a level playing field, although the brands always had the frequent guest programs, which always gave them a significant advantage. And they continue to this day. So I would say there was some innovation happening, but I would say I agree with you. There's been dramatic proliferation of innovation and a broader expansion across sort of hospitality-related assets and the overall hospitality ecosystem dramatically, really, over the last 15 to 20 years and during the majority of my career. Boutiques and lifestyle hotels have become a dramatically larger percentage again.
Yeah.
And then all these, campgrounds and, all these other variations, Airbnbs. It's been prolific, and it's actually, again, coincided with some of the macro trends we talked about around a higher disposable income for a broader number of people in the U.S. and around the world, allowing them access to travel, and then people seeing people in different places around the world through social media, in sort of creating demand for travel in some of those unique places. All of those things sort of collided, if you will, to create this dynamic situation we're in now.
Yeah. Do you think, because I've been asking myself this question and asking several folks to come on the pod this question, do you think a lot of it is it's just easier, to your point, to kind of build and scale and then distribute a brand, really because of the advent of social media, than than it was a couple decades ago. Because it does seem like there are way more boutique operators. Like I know folks who have built tech companies, and all of a sudden now they're hoteliers, like, and that's how they're positioning themselves. And I what I don't know is, was this a trend that was always sort of happening, or is it really that the internet has just made me more aware of it, and or is it that the internet was actually a catalyst for this being able to happen?
I think both. I mean, I think the reality is there was always the billionaire that, created a massive company and it sold it or took it public and said, I want to own my own boutique hotel. In the same way that there are certain people that aspire to own a high-end restaurant, right?
Yeah.
It's just sort of a relatable place that everybody goes to and likes. And hey, I want to interpret my own version of what would be the perfect hotel that I'd want to stay in, my friends would want to stay in, or that I would want my family to stay in. So that's always been sort of part of the ecosystem, particularly at the super luxury level.
Yeah.
Whether it's owning the Ritz in Paris or owning some iconic hotel in LA, and then the boutique hotel. But I would say, with that said, there is a larger percentage probably of people who are doing it now more than ever, and that partly due to social media, partly due to just revenue management and being able to compete against the big chains for the independents if you have a capable revenue management team. So I think all those things are playing into the fact that it's emerging as an even more dynamic, more visible sector to a broader range of people.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love your thoughts. You guys are in this really interesting situation where you build, you own, you manage for the big brands, and then you also have some of your boutique brands.
Yep.
So you must have lots of strong opinions, hot takes, and or at least interesting perspectives on sort of like the state of the industry. I'd love to kind of go layer by layer here a little bit, and let's just start with sort of like the big brands and the work that you guys have done and do for them. What are trends you think that these individuals are paying attention to and are concerned about right now? Any sort of like things you think are top of mind if you're a Marriott or a Hilton or a Hyatt executive right now?
Well, look, I mean, the reality is the publicly traded companies, right, by definition, have multiple constituents to have to answer to. Of course, They have their customers, they have their employees, they have the public, of course, at large, but they have their shareholders too, right?
Yeah.
And any public company has to focus as responsible fiduciaries on earnings per share growth.
Yep.
The only way public companies grow is through sort of same store sale growth, right, at a given asset level, through adding more stores, adding more franchises and more management contracts and more assets, and through mergers and acquisitions, right? That's how you grow, and through efficiency on the expense side. So the public companies are thinking, how can we grow? And the reality is they have now, many of them, 25, 30 different brands, and they're slicing and dicing and the segmentation in every conceivable way, partly because there are those differentiated audiences out there, but frankly, on a purely pragmatic level, because they need to continue to grow their portfolio. And their frequent guest programs can tap into a big, broad 200 million people at Marriott, I think, and Hilton, similar or pretty close. They want to have a broad access to a broad range. Sometimes I want to stay in a lifestyle hotel. Maybe it's a resort. Maybe I want to stay at a Hampton Inn if I'm traveling to a hockey game and, somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so there's different audiences or different times when the same group might want to stay in a different kind of positioning asset. So I think that's driving them. They want to have great customer experiences. They want to have great, consistent customer experiences, have a variety of offerings across the spectrum from mid-scale to super luxury, resort and urban and everywhere in between. But they also, by definition, have to continue to grow. And the only way they grow is through, material same-store sales growth and unit growth.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think? I'm sure this is a Googleable answer here, but like I'm curious from your perspective and insight. We've obviously sort of seen these. We'll just take Marriott for an example, right? Well, you've seen sort of this mass acquisition of loads of brands over the last couple decades, really, but really over the last decade in particular. Do you see? Are there strong investments from a development standpoint in sort of like more autograph hotels, right? Like, are more luxury collection hotels? How from a development standpoint, how focused are they in building more inventory within a specific brand, or is it typically just happening at the Marriott level? Like, hey, just in the next couple decades, we need to grow by X% in terms of number of hotels, or are they taking more of a brand, essentially, a brand collection approach to thinking about growth?
Well, I think, look, the reality is they have absolutely the major chains, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the IHGs, the Hyatts, the Accor, particularly in Europe, but it's also in the U.S. They are, and then Choice at the more mid-market to upper mid-market economy level. They all are, they have, good quality business development people and strategy people that are focused on their individual brands. And how do we create, grow more curio collections and more at Hilton and more autograph collections at Marriott. So they have, key people in each of their verticals focusing on how do we scale and grow that brand or that soft brand.
Yeah.
So they definitely are investing those resources, and those people are working with various hotel owners and management companies to educate them on the nuances of those brands or soft brands and what their positioning thesis is, how they fit in the ecosystem. And I think they do a good job with that. I mean, I think they're slicing and dicing it at a very thin level when you have 30 different brands or soft brands, if you will, within a Hilton or a Hyatt or a Marriott. They all have an IHG. They've all added in order to be competitive and again to grow earnings per share. But yeah, I find them to be focused on developing those appropriately.
I recently had Dan Flannery on the podcast, and Dan launched the Edition brand in partnership with Ian Schrager while he was at Marriott, and he was sort of the chief individual at Marriott that was helping develop the brand. Obviously, Ian did incredible work there. From your perspective, why don't we see more development happening of brands inside these massive hotel companies? Like, why is it Marriott obviously has, I think the last brand they developed before Edition was like Courtyard, and then like every other brand was sort of acquired. Is it just that you get to a certain scale and acquisition is just like way easier, or what's your perspective on this?
I think, look, the reality is it's more efficient in many ways. And I mean, it's not unlike the Microsoft and some of the big tech companies are constantly acquiring small tech companies.
Yeah.
Because they're unique, creative ideas. There's an infrastructure. It's already catching on, and boom, they can buy it, and it's just efficient for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big part of that. They see some unique approach, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, that brand is really caught on. I mean, we've been approached around our Godfrey brand. Wow, you guys have some really neat assets and some neat markets and some nice positioning, And so I think it's just for a variety of reasons, that's why it happens. I don't think the big mega chains are as built to sort of create brands from scratch as the entrepreneurial player would be. In select circumstances, they have done it and will do it probably still, but I think it's going to be more the exception than the rule.
Yeah. Speaking of the Godfrey, I want to hear about how you guys thought about and really came to the decision to launch your own brand. What was that process like? Yeah. And how do you balance that within the context of all of the other work that you're doing for the larger chains? Just talk to us a little bit about the story of the Godfrey.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the reality is, again, I came into it and I still have a view. I come in as first and foremost as an investor, right? I came into the lodging sector as a contrarian investment theme. I wanted to acquire, develop, own, manage hospitality-oriented real estate and generate attractive risk-adjusted investment returns for myself and my investors. So my lens is that of I want to make a smart, disciplined investment.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it if it's a Marriott Courtyard or if it's a super luxury Four Seasons or anywhere a Langham or something like that, anywhere in between. And so in the case of so I come in with somewhat of an agnostic approach, right? And that also goes for how I affiliate. We've had, Hiltons and Marriotts and Hyatts and Thompsons and all those brands we own and or manage and or have over the years.
Yep.
But we also created our own brands. In some cases, they're pure play, where it's a brand of one, like London House or the Julian or the Felix. In the case of Godfrey, we started as a brand of one and then have taken it on the road. In some cases, the Godfrey is a pure play independent. In a couple of our Godfreys, we have chain affiliations, like we're Curio Collection by Hilton, our Godfrey Detroit, which we opened in Corktown, which is this hot emerging part of Detroit. We felt it would make sense to plug into the Hilton Curio Collection, and we have other curios as well. In other cases, the flagship Godfrey in Chicago, the flagship in Boston, likewise Hollywood, they remain at this point purely independent. So the answer as to how it started is we bought a half-built building in Chicago that was originally designed to be a Staybridge Suites.
Okay.
And during the global financial crisis, the original developer got upside down and it went through foreclosure. We bought the note and then negotiated to take over the property and then said, wait, this is beautiful architecture, iconic River North location, a cubist design. Let's re-envision this as an upscale sort of luxury lifestyle hotel.
Wow.
And so, we turned the fourth floor of the parking garage into a big, large rooftop and enclosed the roof and, just said, let's create a lifestyle boutique hotel. And then we said, let's create our own brand. And so we basically looked at a variety of names and we came up with the Godfrey name, which sort of means peace and welcome or sort of Godspeed, it's a warm welcome, if you will, and or greeting and then we created the brand architecture around it, working with our social media teams and some good brand consultants. And said, all right, we're going to position it more luxurious than a typical lifestyle hotel, but more hip than a typical luxury hotel, a heavy F&B emphasis, rooftop emphasis, a very social hotel, nice, attractive rooms, contemporary furniture, et cetera. So we just basically created a brand of one around that as our flagship and then opened it and ramped it up. And we opened the rooftop in the middle of the polar vortex in February of 14 in Chicago. I think we had 700 people there the opening night in February during the polar vortex experiencing the indoor-outdoor roof experience, which was enclosed at the time. So that was the genesis. And then we said, let's take this on the road selectively. If we find real estate to either buy or develop that we think would be logically positioned as this sort of 4.5-star luxury lifestyle boutique brand. But if we find other assets, like in the case of London House in Chicago, we said, wow, this is a 4 3/4 star, or almost 5-star luxury lifestyle, iconic building at 360 North Michigan Avenue. Let's create a really distinctive brand there. And it was called the London Guarantee Building. And there used to be a jazz club called London House. And so we created London House, the brand, the hotel brand, and created a brand of one. In that case, we decided to affiliate it with Curio Collection by Hilton. And again, created sort of an iconic asset at North Michigan Avenue and Wacker Drive and, whatever, number one hotel on TripAdvisor many months in a row in Chicago. So each situation is different. Sometimes it's a brand of one that we incubate in Chicago, take on the road like Godfrey. Julian, we just opened in San Francisco as well. In other cases, it'll be a brand of one and that'll be it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've such a fun job. You get to dabble in all these different areas, right? You get to understand how the big chains like to work, understand, what their development criteria is, what their management styles are. You get to incubate your own brands, right? You can take the things that you like from them and then, discard the things that you don't, right? I mean, what an interesting place to be seated in. Well, what aspect of the business is most exciting to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do really enjoy the variety, right? I mean, I love that. I sort of am a left brain, right brain hybrid, right? I'm sort of more of a decathlete than I am a sort of pure play specialist. So I'd like to think hopefully I'm reasonably good at a variety of things. There are always people that are better and smarter in any given vertical, but hopefully have reasonable facility across multiple verticals. So I really like the creative process. Frankly, I like structuring complicated real estate transactions, frankly, believe it or not. The architecting, the investment thesis, and the capital structure. I like that. I love architecture and design, and I love buildings, whether they're modern or classical or anywhere in between. And I love history. So acquiring a legacy classical building and then basically bringing it back to life and revisioning it as something completely different. I really enjoy that. Again, I love great architecture, love great design, love history and studied history and world history and U.S. history and architectural history, social history, business history, all of that. So I really enjoy that, infusing a classical building that's been falling on hard times and making it relevant again. And then I also enjoy the collaboration with my team members in creating these brands, right? Like, what's the positioning of this asset? Yes, physically, the capital structure side, the design and architectural side, but then now the brand. What's the brand architecture going to be? And what do we want it to be focused on? Highly social, collaborative, great F&B, super tech forward, a really warm home away from home, a place that people can truly treat as a living room for their neighborhood. So I really love that aspect, the creative part of that. And then I love getting in a room with my team and our external advisors and brainstorming positioning strategies for that brand. What do we want to sort of be our typical guest if there is such a one? What kind of car do they drive? What kind of clothes do they wear? Where do
Yeah.
they like to travel? What kind of technology do they use? So you create these sort of, profiles of various scenarios of different audience groups that you'd like to appeal to across the demographics, across the broad spectrum. So I really like the variety, right? I have a relatively short attention span at times, so I like to sort of spread myself at times maybe a little too thinly, but across all of that, I really do. And I'd say leading teams and motivating teams and mentoring teams and being in the mix on all of those realms, all of that I really enjoy.
Have you guys ever acquired a brand?
No, we have not
Okay.
acquired an existing brand. We've acquired existing hotels that have brands on them, Hyatt's and Hilton's and Marriott's, conventional brands, right? But we haven't acquired a brand. We've only incubated our own.
The reason I ask is, a lot of the folks who are listening to this podcast are building really cool, next generation resorts, micro resorts, right there. They straddle sort of the traditional maybe STR space, but they are now bleeding into boutique hotels. Many of them have built incredible collections of cabins that are, have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, right? I mean, they really have built a really compelling audience. Now they're trying to figure out like, all right, I want to go build my, first boutique hotel, and or some have done that already, and they're scaling their portfolio, and they're thinking eventually, right? They're entrepreneurs, and eventually they're thinking about an exit, right? Not all of them want to do this as a lifestyle business forever. In fact, I think few do. I'd love your take, as somebody who's well steeped in the industry, and you're underwriting real estate all the time. How would you think about, or what would be interesting to you with respect to thinking about acquiring an existing brand and bringing it into, maybe it becomes a subset of one of your other brands like a Godfrey, or maybe it becomes kind of a new brand that you guys kind of build and scale within the context of Oxford. Like how would you think about an acquisition like that?
Yeah, look, the reality is, again, in our case, I doubt whether we would buy an existing brand. We're more likely to incubate. Again, we already have, right? With Felix and Julian and London House and Godfrey, and we've created some others recently in San Francisco, the Garrett and the Fiona and Soma House, and then we added another Julian. So I would say we're much more likely to create our own and then scale those and take those to other markets than we are to acquire an existing brand.
Yeah.
Each brand has its own story, and there are, literally hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands around the world of sort of hotel brands, whether they're a one-off or, whatever. And so each has its own personality, its own story, some with more refined brand architecture that people have really thought about in a very precise way. Others, it just sort of organically grew into being this really cool little ski lodge that everybody loves to go to. And, they didn't think about a brand architecture. It just sort of became what it is, right?
Yeah.
And anywhere in between. But, to me, again, we try to just infuse them with personality and with a key positioning and a niche within the marketplace to differentiate them. But look, the reality is a lot of the lifestyle hotels and lifestyle brands, if you will, out there, are very close cousins of each other, right? They all like to say we have our own secret sauce, and we emphasize this and we emphasize that. The reality is many of them emphasize many of the same appropriate things, right? Really high touch customer service, great design, great F&B, a really good social vibe, a place you want to hang out, good programming on the roof, interesting speakers and or music. All of that is sort of universally appealing, and some people execute on it really well and others less so, just like an athletic team.
Yeah. I'd love your thoughts on like loyalty and really guest data, right? Because, one of the things that we're solving for at Journey and attempting to solve for right now is this idea that, you're not, if you're loyal to a Marriott or you're loyal to a Hilton, and you're even if you have great status within these loyalty companies, or within these loyalty programs rather, it becomes hard because, sometimes the best place to stay in a city is not actually the JW Marriott, right? Or it's not a Curio by Hilton hotel. It's actually an independent, or right, it's the Hyatt, right? The Hyatt is what's best known for in that particular market for whatever reason. Beyond that, right? I'm a pretty loyal Bonvoy member myself, right? And I'm shocked, quite frankly, how often I'll go to a hotel that's a part of Bonvoy. Bonvoy clearly has all of my data, and yet the hotel doesn't seem to like actualize on that data. Maybe they have access to it, but they don't really seem to do much of anything. Occasionally I'll get like a custom nice welcome gift or whatever. But I'm quite frankly, as a consumer, just surprised that there isn't more data that is shared that can be actual, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, acted on and actualized.
Acted on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the GM or by the concierge. Talk to me, given your perspective here. How do you think about data in the space? How do you think about like loyalty as a philosophy? Like, what are your strong opinions or hot takes on this?
Yeah, look, a couple things. First of all, I think the hospitality space, first of all, real estate generally and hospitality real estate is getting more sophisticated and leveraging data more and more, right? There's no doubt that the tech overlay is infusing the hospitality world more than ever and will continue to. And as that happens, there's going to be more customization and more access to data across the board. And there are certainly plenty of hotels, including ours, that are doing that more and more, whether they're independents or whether they're chain affiliations. And the big chains are very focused on how do we harvest that data and leverage it to create an even more bespoke experience for our guests and a more bespoke understanding of who they are and what's going to appeal to them. So that's absolutely in process. But I would say hospitality hasn't been at the forefront of that, compared to some other sort of tech companies, but they're now catching up pretty rapidly. So I just think that's in process, right? And I see it more and more when I'm traveling. They're not there yet fully, but I see it more and more.
Yeah. And then what do you think about loyalty? Like, do you think there are some people that would say, consumers don't care about loyalty today in the same way that they did a decade ago? Some would argue that actually loyalty is more important than ever before. Where do you stand on sort of the loyalty front?
Yeah, look, I mean, loyalty, it's defined loyalty, right? I mean, if you call, I want to get my points at Hilton Honors or Bonvoy, and so I'm going to be in quotes loyal, then I guess that's loyalty. The reality is it's a very pragmatic equation. It's like, hey, if I can get my points, I'm going to get free rooms or an upgrade to a plane or whatever. That is a very pragmatic financial decision, which is driving my, in quotes, loyalty, right? So I do think the big programs are absolutely, arguably the key differentiator right now for the big chains. In other words, having Hilton Honors and Marriott Bonvoy and their equivalents across the other major brand families or chain families, that is really the key differentiator right now as to why a customer would stay and why an owner like me, an investor, might affiliate with one of them. Because I'm paying a lot of fees in order to tap into a soft brand by Hilton or Marriott. And I have to believe, after detailed sort of quantitative analysis, that I'm going to at least break even and hopefully more than break even after the fees, like more occupancy, more rate, and ultimately more NOI, even after paying the 8, 9, 10, 12% when you add all the fees in to chain affiliate. And a big part of that appeal is people absolutely want their points. And that's a real driver. And so that is, again, the differentiator for them right now. And will, I think, likely remain so and probably increasingly be a dimension that's the key differentiator.
When you guys talk to Godfrey customers or guests of your other independent brands, I don't know how often or if you've ever asked them directly about loyalty, right? Or like, hey, would you like to earn points on your Godfrey stays? Why do you think consumers that do choose boutique independents do so? I mean, clearly they have choice, right? Clearly they're in markets where, there's a Hilton next door or a Marriott across the street. Why do you think consumers are choosing independents today, especially when for the vast majority of them, there either is no loyalty program, or if there is a loyalty program, it's actually not that valuable because you only have 6 locations, right? Like, and so how do you think about that? Yeah.
So I think, look, a couple of things. First of all, there are absolutely people, including myself and many of my friends and peers, who enjoy sort of, being your own man, being your own woman, like, so, doing your own thing and saying, all right, look, I'm an independent thinker. I don't want to do the conventional cookie cutter expected thing. I want to go explore something unique and off the beaten path. And hey, I'm going to go check out this boutique independent, because it's probably got a little more quirky independent vibe to it. And that appeals to me in terms of my individuality, right? So I think there are definitely a percentage of people who sort of take pride in being that customer, being that traveler, and wanting to sort of do the off the beaten path thing or a little bit less of a mainstream thing. So I think that's a big part of it. And then, frankly, the reality is, a boutique or an independent, if they don't have to pay the big chain fees, they actually have a little more flexibility in pricing, perhaps,
Yep.
as well. So,
Yep.
if you've got a pure play independent here, and then you've got this chain affiliated one there, they're paying, 10, 12, 13% all in to the fee to the chain. The independent can probably undercut them in pricing, have a comparable quality, and still be as profitable or more so.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's a price-driven decision. I mean, markets do work; they're efficient, and people see an opportunity. So I think it's that pricing, the internet giving access to people to constantly compete against each other in terms of pricing and demand equation, and then the independents. I think it all plays a part.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you about OTAs because you got into the business before we saw OTAs dominate in the way that they have over the last couple decades, last decade in particular. But now, right, from my perspective, anyways, and from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, right, you're seeing a lot of these boutique independent brands actually retain and really command higher percentages of direct bookings. I think a lot of that is because brands have gotten more sophisticated at telling their story on social media. It's clear to the consumer today than ever before that when you book direct, you often get the best rates. That wasn't necessarily always true. It also wasn't necessarily always clear, but I think it's becoming clearer. What is your perspective on OTAs? How have OTAs kind of played into your business? Any kind of predictions on sort of their value and their relevancy in the years to come?
Yeah, look, I mean, my head of operations and my right-hand man, and we've got a lot of great people around us, is he describes it, and I agree. OTAs are the biggest travel agents in the world, right? You don't want to turn off the biggest travel agents in the world. You want to leverage them and optimize them.
Yeah.
So we work we hope prudently with the various OTA channels to optimize their pipes to sort of access the demand that comes in through those channels. With that said, there's no doubt that sort of going direct to Godfrey.com and sort of if you will, is an even more efficient, cost-effective way for us to access customers if we can. So look, my view is OTAs are not the devil. They're not the evil. They're the massive travel agent of the world.
Yeah.
And the key is over time, I think their margins shrink. I think their costs gets reduced by virtue of just competition.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in a more mature market, but that they're here to stay and that the customer, the general public are going to continue to use them. And the key is to be able to access them at the least expensive way and to optimize your revenue management strategies working with them and to get as many direct bookings as you can because they're even more efficient and more economically attractive to access them directly.
Do you guys have issues with like the data sharing or lack thereof from OTAs? Because I think, as operators that are independent get a little bit more sophisticated, as they think about growth, one of the challenges that I hear folks talk about often is just the lack of meaningful guest data that gets passed along from the OTAs. Has that been problematic for your business, or do you sort of feel like, hey, we get enough data and it's really just our job to sort of act on that data?
Yeah, I think we always want more data, right? We always want more. The more we have, the more we can work with it to customize the experience, to customize our approach to various demand segments, et cetera. So, look, I wouldn't say that we are deeply frustrated by the amount that we get or feel like we need dramatically more. We'd like to have incrementally more, but it sort of is what it is. I mean, we deal with it because it's the reality of the marketplace.
Yeah.
And again, when you say loyalty, other than people getting their points for their programs, customers and tend to be loyal to, hey, they love a given location, they love the GM or the sales team or the maitre d' or the parking attendant who treats them like a prince.
Yeah.
Right. It's loyalty to the experience, to the people on the front lines, the location, the atmosphere. That's where the real loyalty goes, other than the points, which are a big deal.
Yeah.
And then it comes down to price. And so, people are appropriately pragmatic around, my loyalty goes where I can get the best relative value and I can get the best room at the least price. And that's where I'm going to go hit the bid.
Yeah. 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 No, very, very, very well said. I'd love your thoughts, John, and just as you think about sort of the next decade of luxury hospitality, right? You mentioned at the onset of our conversation that luxury and lifestyle is a category that continues to expand. I think just even anecdotally, I think about, my friends and how everyone travels and, all of our parents would be like mortified to know how much we spend on like these, hotels or these like really cool, glamping destinations or whatever. In fact, I was telling my mom the other day how much I spent at this glamping resort, and she was just like, "What? You spent $900 to stay in a 380 square foot tree house? Like what?" She could not wrap her head around it. And arguably, like there are many of us that probably shouldn't be spending that much money. We do anyways because we can post about it on Instagram. But like, I'd love your thoughts on sort of this category. How do you think it's going to evolve? It does seem like consumers, want more luxury. They want more of these more bespoke experiences, as again we were talking about earlier. What are your predictions, or what are your thoughts on sort of the next decade with respect to any white space that exists in the marketplace that you think a good entrepreneur could come in and either build a new brand in, build an alternative style of hotel in? If you were an entrepreneur trying to build and leverage these trends that we've been talking about today, how might you do so in the next decade?
Yeah, look, I mean, the reality is there's always room for an entrepreneurial approach to things, right? That's just I'm a great believer in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I grew up in the U.S. and we celebrate entrepreneurship and innovation. We're not afraid of failure. We get right back on the horse and we innovate. And that's part of the American secret sauce. And that's part of why the U.S. continues to be such an impressive and important force in the world. So there's always going to be room there. And I think there are a lot of really creative approaches happening, whether it's glamping or camping and just all sorts of experiential travel and experiential things. I think that part of the appeal there, again, is this whole approach toward how can I really focus on experiences versus things, right? Yeah. I think people are really, really focused on that. And so I think to the extent that one can find white space where there's some really unique experience, again, whether it's the Margaritaville resorts and the Jimmy Buffett vibe, or glamping in the upstate New York at an old camp, and anywhere in between, right? There are unique niches that have demand because it's a big country in the U.S. and globally, of course, a lot of travel around the world. There are constituencies that are looking for really unique things, right? Yeah. And so I think the white space is sort of identifying some of those constituencies. I mean, there are people that go to comic shows, right? That's their thing. They want to go and compare notes on comics. Like there's a whole ecosystem there. Well, there are thousands of things like that where, someone say, I may create a theme around X, Y, and Z, or esports, right? I create an esports brand where everybody comes and plays esports. Those are all kind of variations on the theme. So in terms of white space, hard to know. There's constant segmentation and desegmentation happening. But I've seen a lot of it evolve already, and I'm likely to see a lot more.
Yeah. And then what about for you guys at Oxford? Like, as you guys think about sort of your next, few years, your next decade, what are the things that you're focused on and most excited about? Yeah,
look, I mean, we are, we navigated, of course, COVID. We're on defense like everybody globally initially, and then we went on offense, acquiring a variety of assets in sort of 21 and 22, and then executing on turnarounds and business plans in 23 and 24 on assets that we acquired and or developed or were developing, and then optimizing our existing portfolio. So that's sort of a given. Now we're selectively on offense again, acquiring, getting ready to acquire some existing assets and growing. So I expect we'll grow our hospitality portfolio, we'll grow our brands, both in terms of the footprint of our existing brands and or creating new ones. We'll grow our third-party management business. We manage on most of the transactions over the years. We were the managing general partner, the owner, but we've also done a fair amount of third-party management. People have sought us out because we, as an owner mentality, tend to deliver really focused, good margins, great service. And so growing our third-party management business. And then we also have expanded into senior housing, assisted living, independent living, and memory care in the senior housing space. We also were developing multifamily apartment buildings, redeveloping lofts, building high-rise apartments. So, our expansion will be multidimensional, different verticals within real estate and then within hospitality, everywhere from upper mid-scale to luxury lifestyle, owning, managing, investing. So it's going to be opportunity-based. We're constantly trolling, looking for opportunities on a risk-adjusted basis. The reality is over the next 24 to 36 months to 48 months, there's going to be a lot of distressed assets that trade because they had upside-down capital structures. Even if they're operationally doing pretty well, a lot of upside-down capital structures are sort of coming home to roost post-COVID and, all of that. So
Yeah.
we're going to be on the front lines buying some of those distressed assets and or taking over management contracts and turning around assets for owners that were reluctant owners, but are all of a sudden owners. All of those things represent opportunities for us. And I think we try to be in our position. Hard to know. One given area may end up evolving much more quickly and we'll refocus our resources there. Right.
Yeah.
We are under contract for a couple of large senior housing portfolios right now. It's possible, the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to be disproportionately involved in senior housing acquisitions and operational turnarounds. Or it's possible that, all of a sudden we land a couple of big new acquisitions and some third-party management, and then that grows disproportionately, right?
Yeah.
Hard to predict. Just try to put ourselves in a position to be able to call audibles as things unfold and then pivot to where the opportunities are.
Wow. I mean, gosh, when do you guys sleep? That's just what I want to know. I mean,
the answer is I'm very into sort of healthy living, right? Eating really well, exercising. I don't drink, and I try to sleep well. I mean, I try to go to bed early and get up early and just live a balanced, healthy life. So I sleep pretty soundly, and it's not like I'm working constantly. I'm thinking constantly, but I try to enjoy the journey. We do a lot of good travel, and enjoy sports, enjoy culture, enjoy social life, enjoy sort of hopefully a rich, multidimensional experience.
Yeah.
But I also very much enjoy working. I enjoy the sense of purposefulness and productivity and the stimulation that comes from it.
Yeah.
Being in the mix. I love the teamwork. I love the camaraderie. I love sort of making a difference. And it's fun to be a job creator and an employer. And it's gratifying to create new jobs and sustain jobs and allow people to work and raise families. I mean, again, I'm a big believer in the capitalistic ecosystem and all the benefits it provides to society. And being a job creator is one that I'm particularly proud of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very clear that you're passionate about what you do, and it's, I can feel it. Hey, last question, John, before I let you go here. And this is something I've been wondering, it's sort of like random, but have you guys ever bought a hotel that was a part of a Marriott, and then you buy it and then it ends up becoming a part of the Hilton family, the Hilton collection, gets branded as a curio versus an autograph, for instance? And has that shift ever been like meaningfully different? Meaning, have you ever bought an asset and then connected it with a different flag, and then all of a sudden it like dramatically outperforms?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the answer is, look, most of the time, I would say most of the time we acquire an asset and we either up-brand it or turn around an existing brand or strip the brand off and put an independent on or something. It's rare that we would like turn a curio collection by Hilton to an autograph collection by Marriott. The reality is part of how we choose, are we going to do an autograph collection? Because we do luxury lifestyle hotels, either pure play independents or soft brands. I'd say most of our assets are either independents or soft brand affiliated, right? Where we sort of have an independent presence like London House, but it's curio collection by Hilton, so we can leverage through that brand affiliation and the frequent guest programs. I would say most of the time, there's not a dramatic difference in demand pipe. It would just be a matter of like in a given market, if Hilton is dramatically overrepresented in a given market and Marriott's underrepresented on a relative basis, that would be part of the equation. Hey, Hilton's got 5,000 room and Marriott has 20,000 or 2,500 rooms. We may say we're better off adding the autograph collection by Marriott in this market because they're materially underrepresented and the demand will be less diffused across theirs, right? That's how we might make that decision. It's one of the variables, an important variable that we look at. But I wouldn't say in most cases it's, curio by Hilton or autograph by Marriott is materially better. And those are definitely the two big gorillas. They're the sort of duopoly, if you will. And then the others, Hyatts and IHGs and Accor, they're important and valuable, but nowhere near as powerful as the big two in the U.S.
Yeah. No. Well, that makes perfect sense. So I appreciate you answering that question. It's something that I've been curious about and something I like to ask folks that I know own and own hotels that have been part of both collections is, hey, is there a better bang for buck in one, and how do you make that decision and whatnot? But that makes perfect sense. Well, John, this has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy life to spend an hour with me, sharing your story, sharing a little bit about what you guys have done in Oxford. For folks that are interested in connecting with you, I'll have links to your LinkedIn in the show notes below. I'll have a link to your website as well. Is there anywhere else you'd want to send folks who might be interested in your business or might be interested? I don't know if you guys are taking on any investment capital right now. What's the best way for people to get in touch if they're interested in collaborating?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I hadn't really thought about that particularly, but I think oxford-capital.com, accessing the website and then reaching out to my chief of staff through the website would be a logical way to sort of approach us, and through LinkedIn, as you said. And look, Jack, we very much appreciate it. Look, you're a sharp young guy, and I like your creative approach to accessing talent, if you will, across the hospitality landscape. Enjoyed your questions, and happy to answer them as best I could. As any entrepreneur, you're trying to sort of build visibility for your company and your brands, and without being obnoxious about it, trying to continue to build the story. So appreciate the opportunity.
It's been an absolute pleasure, John. All right, have a great day.
Thank you. You too, Zach. Bye-bye.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays, or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.